It's white on a black background. Ah! Alright, so part 3, the takeaways. So hopefully you can tell from the first 2 parts that I'm an anxious type because I try to be as objective as I possibly could. As an anxious, there were 4 main takeaways that I got from this book that really changed my view of attachment. The first one is embrace your needs and communicate them instead of feeling ashamed for having them. As an anxious type, I'm someone who has spent a lot of time hating my need for closeness and intimacy because it makes me vulnerable and open to a lot of hurt, which turns into fear of vulnerability and rejection. But I also know that there's no point in shaming myself for my needs because that's who I am and that's what I need. However, I need to effectively communicate that need, and I can't do that as long as I'm afraid of or too ashamed of expressing that need. The same goes for avoidance, but they don't feel that same sense of shame because society reinforces the idea of independence, so their needs don't get shamed. And I agree that it's okay to need independence and it's okay to need distance, as long as that need is communicated directly, which can't happen if someone just withdraws completely. The activated attachment system in anxious types is actually really easily solved, as long as the anxiety is met with reassurance. However, the danger here is that the anxiety levels stay constant or increase due to mixed signals from your partner. For example, you might get little crumbs of affection here and there, but not the consistent level of affection needed for the relationship to be healthy. Maybe your partner knows the minimum amount of affection you need to keep you around. But because you get the little crumbs of affection, you're hooked. It's like being addicted to drugs. I may or may not have experience with this lamau. So anyways, once the anxious type gets that feeling of closeness again, then they can return to their calm, normal self. However, if they don't get that feeling of closeness, they start to demonstrate protest behavior, which is any action that tries to reestablish contact or closeness with their partner. Basically, it's any action saying, give me attention. Some examples are excessive calling and texting, attempting to make them feel jealous, keeping track of how many text messages they've sent versus how many you've sent, or acting busy and unapproachable. Yikes. Anyways, I hate this book because I keep getting called out. Anyways, because of this, anxious people get a bad rep, and don't get me wrong, protest behaviors are terrible and unhealthy for everyone involved. But I wanted to address that they're often described as needy, dependent, and clingy. In a society where independence is so heavily emphasized, there's that pressure to never rely on or trust other people. We idealize self-sufficiency. We shouldn't need anyone else. We're often put off by people who need to depend on us or others, and maybe we shame ourselves for needing to depend on people. But really, we need that support system. Not meaning that we're utilizing it all the time, but that knowing we have that support system gives us the freedom and feeling of security to go out and explore the world. This idea is called the Dependency Paradox. This leads me into my second takeaway, which is that dependency is a fact. There's an experiment designed by an American-Canadian developmental psychologist named Mary Ainsworth, where a mom and her 12-month-old baby daughter are in a room full of toys. The daughter starts to play with all the different toys while sometimes glancing at her mom. And when her mom leaves the room, she starts wailing. And the research assistant tries to interest her in some colored blocks, but she becomes more agitated and throws one at the assistant's face. And when her mom comes back, she and her mom hug until she stops sobbing. And once the baby is calmed down, the baby is then able to resume playing with all the different toys again. This shows that a child's drive to play and learn is encouraged or stifled by whether or not their primary caregiver is present in the room. And as adults, this need doesn't go away. We all need people that we know we can depend on with 100% certainty. But once we know we have them, then we're able to be fully independent. If we feel that we're all alone, then we're less likely to go out and take risks and be independent in our lives. So really, the trouble doesn't come from having people you depend on. The trouble comes when you choose the wrong people to depend on. Which leads me to my third takeaway. Don't mistake an activated attachment system for love. So, recall that activating strategies are thoughts and feelings that tell you that you need to reestablish closeness with your partner immediately. It's a little confusing to me personally that they're called strategies, but that's just the terminology the book uses. An activated attachment system means that you're having those thoughts and feelings constantly. Recognize that mysterious aloofness doesn't mean that they're deep or angsty, they're not cool or misunderstood. That probably means they're avoidant, or at the very least not great at connecting to people on an emotional level. It is probably not in your best interest to be in a romantic relationship with them. If you feel like you're always waiting for them to give you small amounts of affection, that's not love. I'm just saying, if you've expressed your need for closeness, a good partner would reward you with more closeness and not distance. This is one of my favorite quotes from the book. Don't let emotional unavailability turn you on. Being emotionally unavailable doesn't just hurt other people, it also hurts you. Studies show that avoidants tend to be less happy and satisfied in their relationships. They also tend to blame their partner for not satisfying them. Although avoidants seem to be independent, being avoidant is really not a life of self-sufficiency, but rather a life of repression, because you are repressing your need for having people you can depend on in your life. Which is so sad because you're just pushing away and hurting the people who love and care about you, and I believe this is what's called shooting yourself in the foot. Anxious-avoidant couples are extremely common for reasons that I can discuss in another video if people are interested. This book actually calls it the anxious-avoidant trap. I know School of Life did a video on this already, but as someone who has been in multiple anxious-avoidant relationships, I also have my own insights. So let me know in the comments if you'd be interested. Okay, so at this point, I realized that this might sound like a rant for why avoidant people are terrible and why anxious people are misunderstood. And I swear that's not what I'm trying to do. And I recognize that I'm very biased, but I just want to say that when I read this book, this was what I really needed to hear at the time and make some good decisions for myself. I feel like avoidance needs are already so validated by society that I don't need to validate them more in my video. But there is not only pretty much no validation from society for an anxious person's needs, but also our needs are put down and shamed. So my last main takeaway is that our attachment styles can change. I guess there isn't that much to say about this, but I wasn't aware of this. I thought people were just born with a certain attachment style, and the book says we are genetically predisposed to a certain attachment style. So I thought, okay, maybe it mostly depends on our upbringing. But that's actually also not the case. And the book said this kind of thinking was too one-dimensional. Sad. So it turns out our upbringing is part of it, but also very easily shaped by our romantic relationships in our adult lives. I know, so crazy, right? Which means that there is hope for us non-secure people. But also that means if you are secure, then you could also become non-secure. So watch out. Alright, so part 4, implementing into your daily life. So now we have all this new knowledge about attachment systems, activating and deactivating strategies, protest behavior, the dependency paradox, and that's great and all, but how can we use this information? We all want to have a secure attachment style and date secure people. So how do we do this? How do we anxious-avoidant and anxious-avoidant people become more secure? Well, first, we gotta stop playing mind games. Nobody got time or energy for these fucking mind games. Text them back within a day. If the date went well, stop keeping track of like how many minutes they took to respond to your message. Just tell them you're interested, or clearly and politely cut them off. No ghosting. Applying this in a broader sense, don't expect people to read your mind. If you haven't expressed your needs directly, then you cannot expect people to understand what you need. 2. Remember your relationships with secure people, maybe with a parent, sibling, a close friend, and use that relationship as a model. Think about your relationship with them, and think about how they operate in their relationships. When they go on a date, are they extremely critical of themselves, of the other person? Do they stay in relationships way longer than they should? Or are they able to say, this person is not meeting my needs, and moving on? You could also think of your relationship with your pet or a child. They might break your favorite cup, or draw on the wall in permanent Sharpie, or demand your attention, but we don't assume they're doing it on purpose to hurt us. We give them the benefit of the doubt. If we've had a bad day, we don't take it out on them. And I think this is a great model for secure relationships, and we can use them as a model for our romantic relationships. I think the hardest part about changing is that we have to resist the natural impulses of our attachment types. Non-secure types tend to jump to conclusions and misinterpret behaviors. Anxious people doubt themselves a lot, and avoidant people doubt others a lot. Anxious people's alarms go off when people retract. Avoidance alarms go off when people get close. Neither of those things are healthy. So instead, we need effective communication. Wow, there's so many things to go into for effective communication, but I'll just go into one aspect for now. In terms of resolving conflicts, we should keep some important principles in mind. We need to show basic concern for the other's well-being, stay focused on the topic at hand, which means avoid generalizing the conflict or bringing in past conflicts or making hurtful generalizations. We need to be willing to engage, so not tuning them out and making sure we're there mentally and communicate our feelings and needs. So important. Yep, and we can also prevent conflicts with having more sex and cuddling. Oxytocin. But only as preventing conflicts and not solving them. Okay, so on that note, this video is getting pretty long, and maybe I'll do a part 2 or expand in different parts of the video. Expand on different parts of the video. So let me know what your attachment style is and something you learned from this video so I can feel validated. Thanks for watching the whole thing. I hope this was helpful. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.